Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Little Cabin on the Hill. Still at home at our shop. This is another time to make a project, I guess. So I'm going to just show you some of the things that I'm doing on this latest project and taking some time basically to stay inside right now. This is during that, what are they calling it? The bomb cyclone. So it's about -9 or 10 degrees outside at the moment. So it's a good time just to be in the shop. So let me show you what I've got going on now. All right, here's a look at what I'm working on. This is going to be well, it's like a barn quilt, but it's going to be, I would call it a shed quilt because that's where it's going to live, on our shed at the cabin. So I'm in the middle of it right now. I just have some pieces dry fit. This is, you might be able to tell if you have if you quilt or if you know someone who quilts, this is going to be the bear claw pattern. You can kind of see with the shades, at least in this, I know, like looking at this one right here, you can kind of see the basic pattern. It'll be more distinct because I'm going to use stain and some combination of stain or paint to highlight the colors in the end, but I just want to show you kind of the point I'm at right now. I'm just doing dry fitting, and I'll back up a little bit here. I'll show you how I get started on it, and then as I go along and try to get this finished up, I'll show you again snapshots kind of along the way. Probably will not video in real time, but hopefully I'll give you enough detail that you can kind of see my approach, and maybe if you decide to do one, you'll understand how to do it. So I've taken all the blocks off, and I've labeled things where I want them to go when I put things back together again. I don't always do this. I'm doing it this time because the past quilts that I've done, I've used paint, and so it covers, it covers the wood pretty well. So regardless of what the starting point of the color of the wood looks like, it just gets covered up. But since I'm using stain, and because I have certain blocks that I want to have darker than others, and then here's the look at the wood. You can see there's a variation in the coloring depending on which kind of board I cut it from. So I wanted to label things just so I could make sure when I put it back together, I'm going to get the color combinations that I want, that I'm going to get the contrast that I really want. So just kind of zooming in here a little bit closer, you can see, so the layout lines on my plywood, that's the backer board for it. Again, in the past, I haven't always done this, at least not in as much detail. Sometimes I will just put, depending on the pattern, sometimes I'll just put the, oh, sorry. There we go again with my video clumsiness. So sometimes I'll just put the main diagonals in here just to give you something to help lay out where the corners of the blocks go when you put things together. But depending on the pattern, you might need more guidelines in that, or I'll have like sometimes I'll have the main diagonals and then plus the center lines going left and right and up and down. This time, for whatever reason, I decided just to go ahead and lay everything out. I don't know. I'm not sure if that'll be worth it in the end or not, but we will see. Let's see, what else can I tell you about this? Oh, so again, the backing material, what I use is, what it's worth, it's about a 1/2 inch plywood, and I can't remember the exact name of the type of plywood this is. I believe that it's like an exterior grade. It's definitely not pressure treated, but I think it's what's used sometimes for behind fascia or for fascia boards or soffits on houses that would eventually get covered. So it's meant for outside, but it's not really a direct contact kind of a thing. The quilts that I've done in the past seem to be holding up pretty well after a couple of years, so I'm not too worried about it holding up. I do put a protective coating, polyurethane, on things after I get done. So it seems to be, or on the back, I might even paint it first with an exterior paint just to keep it, as weatherproof as possible. And then, so that's the backing material. What I'm using for the blocks and what I've used for each of the ones I've done so far, I believe, is cedar. And cedar is pretty rot resistant naturally, so I've just been using that, and it seems to hold up pretty well. Again, so far, the things I've done have only been out for a couple of years, but they seem to be holding up in the weather pretty well. So anyway, so I've got everything labeled here where I want it to go back together. I will tell you one lesson learned that I actually forgot. It's been a little while since I made one of these. is that I would recommend not really cutting the backer board until you're done cutting all your blocks. So you want to figure out your dimensions that you're going to use for the overall size quilt you want. This is going to be, when I put a frame on it, it'll be about 24 by 24. So not exactly, but in that neighborhood. It's about a 2-foot square quilt. But so a lot of times the dimensions, obviously, of the material that you're going to have is driven by the overall size of the quilt. But at the same time, like for me, sometimes I'm just using stock that I have already. So sometimes it's the dimension of the stock I have available that drives the dimension of the quilt. But each of the ones I've done so far have been at roughly about 2 feet, 2 feet square. So anyways, but what I have figured out is that in this case, I pre-cut this board. And I was super careful taking my measurements, and I tried to make sure that when I cut all the triangles and the squares, I have it's kind of messed up now, but I put a stop block up, kind of disassemble it mainly, but I'll put a stop block on my miter gauge, or my miter saw, and use some marks and things to try to make sure I have things aligned just so, but there's always error when you're cutting these things. And so what I found out is, in this case, when I dry fit everything, I had some problems where I was overhanging like the side a little bit, which isn't too big of a deal. I mean, you can come back and sand off those edges, but then when you sand it, you might start losing the tips on some of the triangles. So, for a shed quilt, maybe that's not that big of a deal, but my wife is a quilter, and I've always heard, you don't want to try to lop off your corners. So anyways, it's probably easier to go ahead, make your blocks, everything, and then dry fit everything on a larger board, and then mark out, how big that backer board should be before you cut it. It will probably save you some headache in the end. So what I actually found when I did the dry fit, I did find that really a couple of these squares were just a little bit too long, just like a 16th maybe. But by the time you do that and you start adding next pieces down, like from here, and you add these two, all of a sudden it's pushing you off the edge too much. So I did go back and I sanded the ends just a little bit, just to take a little bit off of there, and that seems to help quite a bit. But if you cut all your blocks first and then do a dry fit and then figure out your backer board, that'll probably save you a little bit of headache in the end. Okay, so the next steps, what I like to do is I take these, and I've seen some folks that do it this way, instead of painting when they're using the blocks like I am, we'll take it to the router and route edges on each of them, or chamfer the edges. And I have, get my finger in the way there. I have a router, but it's super old, and I really don't use it that much. And what I found is I just take it over to my benchtop sander, and I will just kind of either by eyeball, or I'll tilt the fence, what do you call that? Not the fence, but the table here, I'll tilt it about 45 degrees so I have a consistent angle. And I just push it in there for a couple of seconds just to knock the edges off of all the blocks. And one thing that does, first off, I think it looks good because it gives you a little bit of bigger like separation, like a shadow line sort of between the blocks. But it also kind of helps you hide a little bit if you have to wiggle things around a little bit to get a little more space to make things line up correctly. I think that gives you a little more leeway to do that. It makes it easier to hide those types of little mistakes. So that's what I'm getting ready to do. So it takes a little while. Obviously, 3 edges of sand on each of the triangles, 4 on the squares and rectangles. And so I'll kind of get my rhythm going and use the benchtop sander over there to knock those edges off, and then I'll be ready I'll probably come back and dry fit things one more time just to look at it, make sure things look good, and then we'll get ready to do the staining after that. So we'll check in with you on the next step. All right, here we are after finish the chamfering the edges on my sander, and so you can kind of see, it gives a little bit of a nice, like a separation between the blocks, I guess. So it helps define all the shapes and everything. So it's looking pretty good. Things dry fit pretty well. I've got things matched up pretty well on the edges. at this point, so if I need to do any sanding at all at the end before I put the frame on, it should be minimal. So happy with that. So now I just have to kind of play around. I have to experiment with some scrap pieces of wood to see what kind of colors I want to use for it, but I'll spare you the details of that one until I finalize things, and then I'll show you the next step along the way. Okay, I was going to spare you at least this intermediate step, but I thought I'd go ahead and show you what I experimented with and what I think I'm going to end up doing for my colors. So if you look here, so I basically need 3 colors, and if I remember when I put this video together, I'll try to insert a picture of the basic at least contrast. The colors won't be the same, but the contrast that you'll see I'm trying to achieve. So I basically need 3 colors. I need a lighter color, an in-between color, and a darker color. So for the lighter color, I really think this is going to work out well. This is a, if I can read the can again, oh, golden oak, yep, finish on that. So I think that's going to be good. This next one is special walnut. Not sure if I'm going to go with that one. I don't think I am, because this next color I really like. This is red oak. And again, these are all cedar blocks. So, and then the next one that I did, this is espresso, which is not bad. But I think between the colors that I've looked at so far, I think I really like that, the red oak a little better for the intermediate color. And then, oh, here's another one. So this was a gel stain instead of the penetrating stains like I was looking at, but this is a mahogany, and it's really not that much different in color from the red oak, but the red oak is just richer color. Actually, on the camera here, it looks like it's a little more red, but in person it looks just like a not quite as rich of a brown. So I have decided against that one. So then the next thing I need is a dark color, and it's going to go on these. The dark is going to go on these, what are already the darker pieces there in the middle. So I actually experimented. I've got some black paint, and in the past, in some of the quilts I've done I've just kind of rubbed on the paint and rubbed it back off, so it wasn't really completely opaque, but it was a little bit see-through. So I thought I'd try the same thing on that wood. So this is what I came up with. And it looks like that if I were to do it. But I thought I would try, since I was staining everything else, I wanted to go back and see what this darker, that espresso color, would it look like on that particular type of wood. Again, it's cedar, but it looks a little different, a little darker. So this is what that looks like, actually, with the espresso stain. So it's really, I really like it a lot. So I think I'm going to go with that, and then it's a little easier to apply that way too. It's not quite as, stain is a mess, but it's not as messy as wiping on and wiping off paint. So I think I'm going to ultimately go with that color combination, and then the frame will likely be that darker color as well when I get to it. So at this point, it's a matter of taking all these blocks, making sure I've got the color scheme matched up correctly with the design, and I'll get those stained. I will dry fit it one more time, I think, after that, just so I can share everything with you before I start gluing everything together. Alrighty, here is the dry fitting after everything's stained. I think it turned out pretty well. I did notice these, the stain on this, even though it's the same stain as on that darker wood there, on these pieces I had to put 2 coats of the stain to let it soak a little bit longer to get it to be as dark as I wanted it to be, but I think in the end it turned out pretty well. So what I've done now, after I was happy with the way everything fit together, I went ahead and just kind of temporarily screwed this border down just to prevent blocks from shifting all around while I'm going back to glue everything in. I've not done that before, but I think that's going to be helpful. I still left, everything basically is fixed. Everything is fixed along each edge, so it can't move. I'm leaving this end exposed at the moment. That gives me a little bit of room if I need to move something a little bit, just to make it easier to get some of the blocks in and out. But I think doing that is going to help just kind of keep everything lined up. And I'm just going to glue. In the past, what I've done is I've actually taken everything off and glued everything back in there one by one. But I think what I'm going to do now, since I had some initial problems with getting things lined up, I think I'm just going to literally take one block out. I'll put some glue. I've used the Type Bond 3 exterior glue. So I'm going to just do one block at a time. Let's take them out, put the glue on the back, pop it back in there. So that's all the next step. And then as soon as I get that done, I'll weight things down and then let it dry overnight, and then I'll start working on the frame. And the frame, all I'm going to do is rip down some more. I should have enough cedar. I do. I see it in the background over here. Those boards right there are all cedar. So I'm going to rip one of those boards into roughly 1.5 inch thick frame pieces, and so I'm just going to make a simple frame, and I don't make anything fancy on these frames. I just butt joint everything together, and then I screw it. I don't use glue on the frames normally, so like where this temporary thing is sitting here, I'll just put the frame obviously along that edge, and then I usually just screw right in to the edge of the edge of the blocks in a few different places, and it seems to be holding up pretty good on those quilts that I've done in the past. So that's what I'm going to keep doing. It makes life simple. And so anyways, I won't bother showing you the gluing process because it's not going to look anything different than this. So I think the next thing you'll see is either after I've made the frame and I've got it kind of sitting there, or maybe not till the end. I think that's probably the most obvious, or the most, I don't know, the thing that makes most sense, I guess, because there won't be a whole lot to show between now and then. So I'll just piece together the frame, put everything together, and then I think you'll see the finished product minus the top coat that I've got to put some sort of a polyurethane finish on it. But hang in there and we'll show you the next step. All right, folks, here she is. I would say complete, but not quite complete. I'm cheating a little bit. I finished the frame except for the fact that I don't have enough fasteners to connect it to it at the moment. So instead of waiting around, and who knows, the next couple days, the roads are kind of bad, so I'm not sure when I'm going to get to the hardware store to get my screws that I normally use. But anyways, that's how it turns out. This is pretty much it. And I will show you, so just in case anybody cares, this is the type of screw that if I can get it focused there well enough, this is the type of screw that I kind of like using. Where's my focus? Anyhow, here's might be easier just to see this exterior trim screw. They have a real small head, and they just go in real nicely, especially in the skinny pieces of wood, and they don't seem to have any problem with making things split. So anyways, that's what I only have a handful of those, so I need a few more. So I'll get those at the store. And then the last thing that I do once I will, as I said, I'll put a top coat on it, some sort polyurethane. And then the last thing I do is I'll put it's kind of like a cleat, a mounting bracket on the back of it. You can see there, I get this, I'm sure there's other brands, but I get this at Lowe's. And I've just used this with each other quilts, and it seems to work nicely because it's pretty heavy duty, and when you mount it, you mount one side to the building, whatever you're going to mount it to, and then the other side, obviously, to the back of the quilt. And then the nice thing is, once you hang it on there, it's kind of like one of those French cleat systems, but you can slide it back and forth. So if it's not perfectly centered where you want it, you can slide it a little bit, and fine tune it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So anyways, that's going to be the last steps that I do. And so again, I hope this is helpful to you if you've considered doing this. Again, it's different than doing just painting a square, which there's a lot of talent and time and effort that goes into those as well, but I just kind of like doing this approach. My wife actually talked me into it, since I said she is a quilter. So she just likes the idea of actually working with the shapes themselves and the blocks. And so it's kind of cool, I think. So I've done about, hmm, not that many, like maybe 4. I'll try to show here at the end of the video. I'll throw some images in so you can see the examples of the others that I've done. But I'll show you maybe at this point, if you come back to when we're actually at the cabin, I'm going to hang it on the shed down there. I think that's the plan instead of on the cabin. But anyways, we'll show that at some point and hope you'll join us there. So until then, we'll see you next time at the little cabin on the hill.